So a quick recap of what we studied in the last lecture. We started with the individual components of a permanent way. We started with the first component, the topmost one, that is the rails. We discussed the functions, then the types. Mainly there are three types: double-headed, which has a symmetry around its x and y axis; the bull-headed rail, in which the top part or the head of the rail is having more metal or more cross section than the lower part, which rests on the sleeper; and the third or the latest type of rails that are used, flat-footed rails, also known as Vignol's rail, which has a head which is similar to the above two, double-headed and bull-headed, but the foot of the rail, it is spread, or it is a flat one, allowing good distribution of the load or the stress coming from the moving load of the wheels. Then these are the actual photos that we saw. Then we came to the next component, which is on which the rails are fixed. Those are the sleepers. Again, we saw the functions of sleeper. Then some typical pictures, the requirements of a sleeper. Then we came to the classification. The classification of sleepers, it mainly depends on the material from which it is prepared. So we have three main categories in that: the wooden, metal, and the concrete. The latest that are used are nowadays concrete, in that RCC and PSC, reinforced and pre-stressed. Wooden sleepers are now outdated and almost no one uses it anywhere in the world. Metal sleepers you can find uh, in few cases, mainly in the cases of bridges, railway bridges, you find these metal sleepers due to their lightweight. So these were the pictorial representations of the types. The first one is the wooden, then the cast iron, then the steel one, the RCC on the concrete sleepers, the pre-stressed sleeper, and the composite one. Composite, I told, it were not utilized over the world. It is utilized only at specific locations, and mainly it is made up of the plastic and e-waste which is generated. Then we ended the lecture with points of comparison, that I told you to assume the scenario that you are a section in charge in railway and you are supposed to select the type of sleeper for your section. So you will be selecting that type amongst the all 6 or 7 whatever are available at that point of time, based on some parameters, and these are the parameters that we consider, the 15 parameters. Again, I told you that details I would leave it to you to just read it and you can understand it. I displayed the points of comparison. So these are the 15 points. Now starting with today's content, we'll continue with the components of permanent way. The third component on which the sleepers are resting, or the sleepers are packed into it, more appropriate words, that is the ballast. Now ballast, you all have seen, it is the aggregate layer or the aggregates in which the sleepers are embedded, or they are packed. They are not just placed over the ballast, they are packed, as in uh, the ballast is surrounding the sleeper from all the direction except the top one. Okay? So it is nothing but a granular material. Usually it is broken stone, and it is packed below and around. This is important. It is not just below the sleepers, it is also around the sleepers to transmit the load from the sleepers to the formation. And this is one more important function of your ballast, that it allows drainage of the track, proper drainage. So coming to the functions, as I mentioned in the earlier lecture as well, that in all the components of permanent way, there are few functions which are common, such as the load transfer, or holding the railway track in position, maintaining the gauge. So same way you can find those functions in the ballast also, that they should be able to transfer load properly, hold the sleepers in position so that the lateral and longitudinal movements are restricted. Then it provides easy means of correct maintaining the correct levels of two lines. Whatever is the level that has to be maintained between the two rails, so that is maintained using this ballast layer. Then a different function of ballast from the other components of permanent way is that it provides good drained foundation. So even if in case of high runoff or high precipitation causing uh, greater runoff, so in that case for few minutes or hours the track might be underwater, but if your ballast layer is good, it is having good drainage properties, then it will be easily drained, the water will be easily drained off. But there is a trade-off in that. The more, if you want maximum drainage efficiency, you need to have more voids in the ballast layer. But if you have more voids, it will affect the stability of the system and it will not hold this slipper properly. So you can't have both the things. We generally, there is a trade-off. You try to achieve the optimum one, that you provide a or design the layer in such a way, or design the size of that layer in such a way that it holds the slipper as well as it provides proper drainage. So for more drainage, you have a side drain along the rail track that will easily, or that will take off the load from the ballast layer. Then there are some requirements of a good ballast. Now, again, these are quite obvious ones. If I tell you that you have to select a material for a ballast, or which can be used as ballast. So, what should be its desirable property? So, obviously, you will say that it should withstand this cracking or crushing stress. Then it should not make the track dusty or muddy. This is important. Okay. This is important because we will see in the next few slides that there are different types of material that can be used in ballast. It's not always the aggregates of these size which are used. Depending on the availability in the material in the area where the track is being laid, so this material can vary. So there are instances where you have some fine grained material. So in that case, it should be not so fine grained that it makes your track dusty or muddy, so that will affect the visibility of the track. Then again, it should avoid easy drainage, but this is also an important factor. You must have studied in geotechnical engineering that there is something called capillary action. Capillary action, as in, if you have a layer or a material, and if there is, suppose, water below, okay, if you have water over here, it's a groundwater, you can say groundwater table, and over that you are laying some or placing some layers of different material. So suppose this is my ballast layer that I am considering. So what we are expecting from this layer is that whatever is the runoff or the surface or the precipitation which comes in form of or converts in form of runoff, this precipitation should be easily drained out of the railway track. But at the same time, this groundwater, if your voids between the material or individual material, if you consider within a ballast layer, if you have stones, suppose, so between two stones there is a void. So you have studied in geotech that that void is capable of draining water from top to bottom, and also if that void is not sufficiently large enough, it is small, so it is also capable of taking the water from bottom to the up, and this bottom to up traveling of water or the liquid, we called it as a capillary action. So this should be kept in mind while designing or selecting the ballast layer, that it should have sufficiently large voids, and again then you have to optimize it. It should not be large enough to cause this instability to the track, but it should be large enough so that you don't have capillary action from the bottom surface. It should offer resistance to abrasion and weathering. It retains its position. So these are the general ones. This is specific to the ballast, that the size of ballast they have given depending on the sleepers that you are using. So this is again a general criteria. It's not hard and fast, but what they have seen for the most of the years in Indian Railways. So from that experience, they have given these values. And this should also be taken into consideration that ballast should be available in nearby quarries, because this is the material which is required in abundant, and you also require frequent changing of the mainly top material which is on the top surface or near very close to the sleeper, because that mostly gets crushed due to the loading. So you need to at least change the top ones regularly. So for that, abundant material, if it is available nearby, so it will reduce your cost of construction as well as the future maintenance. So in the next few slides, I have just shown the different types of material that can be used as ballast. So the first one, which is the most popular, or you can see it almost in majority of parts in India, if you have traveled mainly in Maharashtra, so you'll find these kind of broken stones. Then if not, then there are various options. The second option is gravel or river pebbles. So this photo is mainly of river pebbles. So in the area where you don't have mountains, but you have a good rocky river bed, and which has been deposited with such pebbles, so those you can use. They are also strong enough to withstand the loading. The third that you can use is ashes or cinder. Now, not ashes exactly, but a solidified form of ashes or cinder. Cinder is nothing but this is a typical single view of a single cinder block. You have studied in geology that igneous rocks. So during volcanic eruptions, the molten lava which spreads, it cools down and then it forms rocks. So cinders is also one category of rock that is formed in that process, but the only difference is it has a much more voids than the other igneous rocks that you know, that is basalt. If you see compacted basalt, so it is almost zero void rock. But on contrary to that, this cinder, it is also a igneous one, but if you see from the picture itself, it has a lot more of pores than your basalt, compacted basalt can have. Okay, so these are a little bit lightweight, but strength wise it has some good strength because they are formed from the volcanic eruptions, so those can be used if it is available in the area. The fourth one that we can use is sand. Now again, not exactly sand, but preferably we consider the using the mix of sand and gravel. You can see in this picture as well, the fine material that you see, that is the actual sand. And then you can see also some big aggregates that you can see, coarse aggregates. So generally we prefer such a mix. Mainly this kind of ballast, it is used in the desert region. In most extreme desert is parts of Rajasthan, Jaisalmer, or the nearby areas, Jodhpur, Jaisalmer, or Barmer, you can say. So there generally these rocks are not that much available. So there, whatever is the desert sand, that is used. Then fifth and sixth type we have conquered. It's a uh, you can say Indian term. I have shown in this whatever small pieces of rocks you see on the surface. So those are just collected if you have that in abundance. Those are collected, or just this layer is scrapped and then the material is used as a ballast. Generally, it is not that much preferred because its size is very small. Then you have murum. Murum is also one of the very much abundant, or you can say available material easily in many parts of India, mainly the central southern parts. So there you can have this as a ballast, but again you have a mix of this murum plus the coarse aggregates. Only Murum will not provide the proper drainage. As you can see, it is a mix of, it is almost a well graded soil. It has fines as well as coarse. So the fines, if it is well graded, the permeability will be an issue. So that is considered. The seventh one is bricks. Okay, it can be overburn bricks or it can be normal bricks which are somewhat defaced and they are not used in construction. So they are just broken into pieces and they are used in the ballast, or specifically bricks which are only made for ballast purposes. Those are also utilized. Then the next you have blast furnace slag. Now, if you have not heard this term before, this is nothing but the residue which remains after the processing or manufacturing of steel, mainly steel or some other metal. So mainly steel. So whatever is the slag or the metal which remains at the bottom of the furnace, so that is the blast furnace slag. So you have this available in different sizes. Here what you see, this is the largest size available for a blast furnace slag, but you also get blast furnace slag in form of powder. But for ballast, you need some coarser material, so that's why we use this size. So that was all related to the materials that we can use as a ballast. Next in this slide, we'll just see in short that what should be the actual size of the layers or the individual pieces of the aggregates, if you see. So the size varies from 1.9 centimeter to 5.1 centimeter. It's in terms of mm, you can say it can vary from 16 to 19 mm to around 50 mm. So for wooden slipper, it's 50 mm. Now for wooden slipper, the size is more because the larger size, so the voids will be more. And wooden slippers, if you have water logging issues, so it can hamper the functionality of that woolen slipper and it will cause much more faster decay. So for that you require a good drainage facility, so that's why the size is more. For steel slipper you can see it is less, and same for the switches and crossings. This will be seen in detail in the second unit. Now you need to just remember the term switch and crossing. Then there is a standard formula used in Indian Railways for finding out the minimum depth of ballast layer. Now, generally, no numerical is asked on this in your university exams, but this formula is useful from the competitive exam point of view. There might or there can be numerical on this, that whatever the thickness, it depends on what is the sleeper spacing you are providing, which is shown by capital S, and the width of the sleeper. So depending on that, you find out the minimum depth of ballast required, and likewise you place it. So this table, it shows the typical values that are used in Indian Railways for broad gauge, meter gauge, and narrow gauge. So you can just have a look at it when you go through the slides. The last term in the, or last component in the permanent way that we will be seeing is the fittings and fastening. Now, repeatedly I have told you that your rails, they are not just placed on the sleepers, but they are fixed to the sleepers. So that fixing component is nothing but what we'll be seeing in this section, the fittings and fastenings. So these are used to keep the rails in proper position and to set the points and crossing properly. Now again, these two terms you will be seeing in detail in second unit. For now, just remember there are some terms called points and crossing in your railways. So your fittings do that work of maintaining or keeping the rails in position. They link the rail endwise and fix the rails either on chairs to the sleeper or directly to the sleeper. So we'll be seeing what is this chair or how can you directly place it on the sleeper. So they are generally, the rails are linked endwise. That means one end of the rail, mainly the transfer, in the transfer direction, whatever is the end, so that is fixed to the sleepers. So typical pictures I have just included in this. You can get the description in the notes and the books. But what is important if you understand it pictorial or remember it in picture form, you can very well describe it. So first and the widely used fittings and fastening is fish plate. Now fish plate is used for rail to rail connection, means it is not the connection used to join the rails to the sleeper, but it is used to join the rails to the rails. Now you can see in this picture, this is the first rail. Okay, this is the first rail and this is the second rail. You can see the gap in between. Okay. Now these two rails are joined using this fish plate. Now rails, even if we say that the railway track is a continuous uh, is of continuous length, but the rails itself, they cannot be made of continuous length. You cannot have an thousands of kilometer of rail without any uh, end to it. So generally there are some lengths in which these rails are manufactured and same way they are placed. So after placing, you need to join them to make the connectivity. So the plate which joins these two rails is called the fish plate, and these bolts that you see, nut and bolt assembly, so that those are fish bolts and nuts. Okay. So generally the size of the fish plate or the section you will be seeing in next of the few slides, the cross section of this fish plate. So it is such that whatever is the shape of your rail, okay, your rail, it is suppose we consider you have a flat footed rail. So flat footed rail, if you have, tentatively I am just, okay, if this is the type of flat footed rail, whatever is the shape of this part, the web part, so typically your fish plate is also of this same shape, so that it maintains the uh, what you can say, stability of the system. And if it is of the same shape, then the loads are efficiently transferred from one rail to the another while the movement of the wheels takes place. Okay, so this is the point to remember. So it looks something like this. On the both the sides you have fish plates, and both these fish plates are running across the length of the joint. This is the joint, and they are just connected by a simple nut and bolt assembly, which is through one. Okay, so the hole is drilled in your rail as well as in your fish plate, and then you have this type of assembly. So these are the fish bolt, the red one, and the blue one is the fish plate. I hope it is clear from the picture and the explanation. Then the next you have dog spikes. Now dog spikes are something that were used predominantly when wooden slippers were in much use. So it is nothing but sort of a nail, you can say, what you must have seen, but it just have a different shape on its head and at the bottom depending on the use. So generally they are pointed if you have to insert them in the wooden slippers. So this is the actual way that spikes are used. These are the dog spikes. So it has a head, and if you see the head, generally all the heads are such that you have this kind of arrangement at the head. So this area, the flat area what you see here, this, so this is where the holding of the rails takes place. So the rails are holded in somewhat like this fashion. Okay, don't mind the, or don't look closely at the shape of the rail. It's just something I am trying to draw with the pointer, but just understand the concept that the foot of the rail, it is hold or held by this head of your dog spike. So the same is shown here, you can see. So they are hammered inside this wooden slippers, and we will be seeing this component. This is the chair that we were talking about. So it is inserted in the slipper, and this head, it holds this flat foot section, and that's how it maintains the stability of the rails. Okay, and this is the way, if you want to replace it or remove it for maintenance purpose, you have to just remove it as you remove the nail from a wall using the other end of the hammer, the remover end. The same way you can remove this dog spikes. Then you have screw spikes. Now these are advancement to the dog spikes. As I told you, dog spikes, they were mainly used when wooden slippers were in abundant, but later on as the material went on changing, so the spikes also went on changing. So now what we use is the screw spikes or round spikes. Then you also have something called elastic spikes for light tracks or maintenance tracks or station yard tracks. And there is a standard spike. Now it's a photo I have not shown because it's a one theoretical one. Generally standard spikes are not used. The other of these which I discussed, the dog spikes, the screw spikes, round spikes, and elastic ones are used. Okay, so these are nothing but spikes. Now spikes, if you see, their main use is to hold the rail to the sleeper. Okay, so that's why the spikes are used. Then comes another important component of your or type of your fittings and fastening, that is chairs. Now if you just focus on the main name, so it is a chair, so it is very similar to the chair that we use for sitting purpose. So it has a back and then it has a seat and then you have legs to the chair. So this is a general chair that we use for sitting purpose. So it's just what is replicated in the railways, just the difference is only the top portion is taken into consideration. You don't have legs for a chair in this railway engineering or the fittings type chair. So you only have this L section. So you can see in this pictorial representation. So this is the vertical surface. Okay, it's not exact L, but it replicates the same shape. Okay, so for stability purpose, it is slanted on the outer side, and the side which is touching the rails or which is facing the rails, it is the one which is vertical. So it's similar to the chair concept, and whatever other rails, so their rails, they rest here. Okay, this can be the foot of the rail. Again, ignore the shape, understand the concept. Now exactly there can't be the your shape of the chair, it's not exactly matching with this groove. So what is done is a packing is inserted in between. So this is the packing. Okay, and this packing is nothing but this key. It is known as the key. Okay, so it holds or it fills the gap between the fittings and the rails. Not always it is possible to prepare or come up with a fitting and fastening which matches the groove size of the web of your rail. So in that case, there are small components called as keys and some other things, blocks, keys and blocks mainly. So those are used to fill in the gaps, and then you can just place it. So now if you see here, there is no connection between that key and this chair. Okay, as we had in the fish plate. So there is no through screw. So what does it mean is this key, the size of this key should be exactly matching with the size of the groove available. Okay, so it is inserted inside with hammering action. Okay, so it's an exact size, and then over the period of time, due to wear and tear, it may become loose. Then you need to change it or maintain it properly. Okay, so this is the typical actual picture of the chair that are used. If you see here, it is the same as the one shown in the picture. Okay, and whatever is the gap between, so this is the key. Now this key what is used, it can be wooden. The one which is shown here is wooden in the sketch, but the one which is used actually, it is this one is a metal one, so it is a metal key. Okay, so metal key has its own advantage that it lasts long than your wooden one. So this is the metal key. Okay. So this is the concept of chair, and generally they are made of cast iron. Now chairs, they are mainly used for bull-headed and double-headed rails, but you can also see chairs for flat-footed rails, mainly in the sections where your rail is subjected to a lot of lateral forces. So mainly at the points and crossing. Points and crossing is nothing but mainly at the curve section. Suppose these are the two rails. You must have seen this kind of assembly. Okay, that there are from one track there are two tracks coming out. So that is nothing but a point and crossing assembly. So where a train takes a turn left or right, it exerts a lot of lateral force as compared to the section straight section. So at these sections, generally to resist the lateral forces, the chair assembly is best suited because it's straight face. It will resist this lateral force or the push. Okay, so that will keep your rail in position. And there are some other types of fastening as well. Bolts, general bolts are used. Then blocks and keys, I told you that these are nothing but small portions. Blocks is nothing but small blocks inserted between two rails to maintain the required spacing or to fill the gap. And key, it is again a small sections, but it is a tapered one. It can be timber or steel to fix the rails to the chairs. Okay, so as I told you, the size of this or shape of this key, it should exactly match to the shape of the groove which is to be filled. So many of times these keys are tapered, but blocks are almost rectangular cubical in shape. Okay, so you can have these blocks. So you'll be seeing these blocks in the crossings and points and crossing where you need to maintain a distance between two rails. So there these blocks are used. Okay, and keys you saw in the previous slide. And there is something called bearing plate as well. Now bearing plate, if you recall, in the last lecture when we were discussing the sleepers, rails and sleepers, so I told you that whole lot of stress or greater magnitude of load, it is passed on to the sleeper through a small area of your rails, and that causes bearing stresses at the bottom face of the rails. So to resist that, you need a proper bearing area on your sleepers as well. What we can have is bearing plates which are placed between the rails and sleepers. Suppose again, in picture, if I need to show you, so this might be the rail, and this is the sleeper. So if you know that bearing stresses are much more in a particular section, so what we can have is, instead of directly placing your rail on the sleeper, you can have a small plate, a metal plate. Okay? Its thickness is just minimum one, which is placed exactly below the rail, and it acts as a bearing plate. Okay, so whatever the bearing stress is, so metal is good in resisting those stresses. So that's why this metal strip, or sometimes it is a bit of elastic also, a composite rubber material also can be used, so that it also adds to the dampening effect. That is placed, and below that then the sleepers are located. So this is nothing but the bearing plate. Okay, the yellow one which I am showing here, trying to show here. So this is all related to the different components of a permanent way. Again, just to, if we would take a quick recap. So your permanent way, it had, yeah, so permanent way, it had many components, a lot more of components. We started with the first one, which was the rails. We saw the types of rails, mainly three types, then bull-headed, double-headed, and the flat foot. Then we moved on to the next component to which the rails are attached, that is the sleepers. Their main purpose is to transmit the load from, or take the load from the rails and transmit it to the surrounding component. The next component that we saw is the ballast, which is the material which is binding or which is holding together the sleepers. And the main use of ballast is to hold the sleepers as well as to provide a good drainage to the permanent way. Then we saw the components which are used for joining rails to the sleepers as well as rails to rails. So we saw fish plate for that. So that's all with the components of a permanent way. So in detail we have discussed it, and whatever is the reading part I leave it to you, so that you'll just go through it and you'll understand it. Conceptual wise I have tried to cover everything. Now the last one, last part or last type of fitting and fastening that we see is the pantry clip. Now this is the type of clip, if you see this picture that I am just highlighting. So this is the actual picture of a pantry clip. This is almost now used everywhere in Indian Railways. If you would have seen, not just in Indian but in many other abroad countries also, this pantry clip is preferred. Now what it is just a uh, you can say it is a sort of a paper clip that you use for your holding together two papers. So in same way it is somewhat in a U shape, but the only difference is it is made of solid metal material. It is generally steel or any composite or alloy of steel. And if you see the placing, so this is a sleeper. You have this black plate that you can see. So this is the bearing plate or the rubber pad, you can say, which dampens the vibrations. So as this material is steel, so steel to steel interaction will be much high and the vibrations will amplify. So for that you have this rubber pad, okay, what you see here. And then over that you have this groove, this, okay, this red one which is seen on the right side. The right side is the animation. It is taken from the animation or exploded view of an animated exploded view of a pantry clip. So this red one is nothing but the holding component for your pantry clip, and these blue ones are actually the clips, and they fit into this one end, fit into the longer end. It fits into this groove, and the flat end it rests on the surface of your flat foot rail. So generally, these pantry clip are only possible to use if you have a flat footed rail. So here you just see three components: the groove or the cast in shoulder, it is called, the rubber pad, and the clip itself. But if you see an exploded view, there are small components in it. So this is the one which is used nowadays. So what I've done is, now as we are having restriction of showing videos in the lecture, so on this link, the first link, you will find an animation in which they have showed step by step how you install a pantry clip, so you can get all the components in there. And other than that, I have listed three uh, links. So these are in general, it's related to one of the leading company which manufactures these fastenings. So you can just go and browse to their website and see the links, and you can see the different types of fastenings which are used. Okay, so coming towards the end of today's lecture, so there is one part in this unit which is related to modern developments in railways, and that I'll be leaving you for self study. What you have in that is metro rail, monorail, and bullet train. Now, just as you scroll your social media, Facebook or Insta or Snapchat, so in the same way, you can just go to various internet sources. Even if you just search in metro rail in Google, you'll get a lot more of results. So whatever sites you feel, you just go through the material on those sites related to metro, mono, and bullet train, and then you have to do it yourself. You have to understand it. Okay, not just scroll it, understand it. And then once you understand it, so after a few days I'll be giving you an activity, so which will be more specific or a case study type of thing. related to metro, mono, and bullet train. Okay. So this I leave it to you. Now, just before ending this session, in tomorrow's or in Friday's lecture, coming Friday's lecture, what we'll be seeing is what is the concept of tilting of rails and coning of wheels. So for that, again, that concept is very well understood if you see videos. But as we are having restriction on showing videos, so what I will be doing is I will be sharing the video prior today itself, or maximum by tomorrow. I'll try it today itself. So I'll upload them on the Google Classroom, as well as I will send it on the WhatsApp. So whatever you are comfortable with, you can see. So see that video. In that video, it's an animation that why do you need tilting of rails, and what is the coning of wheel concept. So once you see that video, you'll understand something, and then I'll clarify everything in detail when we come to the lecture on Friday. Okay. So I have restriction from my end that I cannot play the video and then side by side explain you. So for that purpose, I am just flipping the way of conducting this topic or covering this topic, that I'll be releasing the video. It's not my explanation, but it's a YouTube video. So you can just see it, understand it, listen it, and then we'll discuss in the Friday's lecture. So don't forget to see that link or see that video. Okay, and otherwise you will not get anything. I'll just be talking in the lecture. So for that, it's necessary that you should see that clip. Okay. So that's all for today. If any doubts you have, you can type it in the doubt section. We have